Hello, everyone. My name is Saad Usmani. I'm the Chief of Myeloma Service at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. And it's a pleasure to bring to you a very interesting discussion in this Impact Echo project focused on disparities in myeloma care. It's around patient advocacy, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague and friend, Yelak Biru, who is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the International Myeloma Foundation and a patient himself. So, he's been a wonderful patient advocate over the years and supporting the myeloma research community, supporting other patients in advocating for better care for myeloma patients, creating awareness about the disease. And it's my privilege and honor to have him here to discuss this particular topic. So welcome, Yelak. I would love to hear a bit more about your initial journey as a myeloma patient and pearls of wisdom that you can share with us.
Absolutely, Dr. Usmani. Thank you for having me, and thank you for putting this wonderful program together. As you mentioned, I am a myeloma patient, uh, but originally, when I was diagnosed, I did not fit the mold of a typical myeloma patient. I was diagnosed at the age of 25 years old. It was actually a few months before my 26th birthday, around Christmas time frame, when I was told I had stage three at that time, stage three myeloma, and I only have 2 or 3 years to live. Fortunately for me, that was about 26 years ago, and I hope I have many more years to come. And throughout the year, I have been on many treatments. But as you know, in 1995, early 96, the only available treatment was high dose chemotherapy, followed by high dose chemotherapy and a transplant. So I went through those first high dose chemotherapies, which you guys either don't give now or the younger physicians don't know what they are because they haven't used them. And I went into a 5 year treatment free interval uh, for until about 2000, 2001. And then the novel therapies start becoming available. While no one really wants to have myeloma, in my opinion, this is the best time ever to have myeloma. There are over a dozen approved treatments and a few that are in the pipeline, and hopefully they will soon be approved as well. So that's really my story in a box.
No, it's a much more interesting story than that. I've heard you chat about the challenges you had. You're right. You did not face you weren't the typical myeloma patient. You were very young, and by virtue of having trained in Arkansas, I'm one of the few quote unquote millennials who has utilized the old-fashioned chemotherapies, and so you have seen the development of myeloma treatments over the years, going from the conventional chemotherapies to small molecules and now immunotherapies. And what you're describing as the best time to be a myeloma patient, I think is right for several reasons. And one thing that I want to point out is the patient advocacy piece. It was you and a lot of colleagues, and peers who actually took this upon themselves to be part of the solution, to try to help drive that innovation and be part of the research efforts. What prompted your engagement as a patient advocate?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I never, and I still don't consider myself a patient advocate or even an advocate, but as someone who wants to pay it forward, knowing that all of the improvements in outcome over the last 2 decades or so came because of patients that have traveled this path before me. So I want to do the same for those who are going to come after me. It kind of, I call myself like the baton carrier. I accepted the baton from the previous patients, and I want to carry it as long and as far as possible, and then give it to the next set of patients who end up coming after me. But as I learned to advocate for myself and say, I don't want that treatment because it's going to keep me away from work for an extended period of time. Or at that time, if you took treatment A, treatment B may be out of purview for you. As I want to discuss more about quality of life, the type of quality of life I want, uh, as I learned more, the best way to engage with my clinicians in the healthcare system, advocating for others and representing their voice became a natural extension. And but over the last several years, I have been able to work with industry partners, with the NCI, NIH. I am a patient advocate with ECOG, and now I am part of the patient advocate for FDA. And now, as you mentioned earlier, I'm also privileged to be the chief executive officer of the International Myeloma Foundation, and really marry my passion and my lifelong experience in business to be able to give back more meaningfully to the myeloma community.
Um, how have you found your partnership with your clinical care team to help you during that process, Yelak?
Yeah, we hear the word shared decision making a lot in advocacy, and the way I see that is not just you as a clinician knowing me as a myeloma carrier, but you as a clinician knowing me as Yelak the person who knows me as, at that time, somebody who was going to graduate school, was newly married, wants to go back and see his parents in Ethiopia. Now, as somebody who's advocating, who wants to travel. And so looking at me more holistically, and me understanding what you bring to the table as a clinician, as a researcher, as an advocate on my behalf into the research community. So I really consider it a mutual relationship that we build over time. The more you know me, the more I know you. It becomes less of a transaction, but more of a relationship.
You are hitting a very important point. I think being a physician and a doctor, one of the things that I truly enjoy is building those relationships, because in the end, if you look at life as a whole, that's what it's all about, building relationships. And I do see this, as one of the challenges, in the field in general, is, how do you help address our patients' care goals and their life goals, and create some sort of a balance, as you go through their disease management plan. And I think, it's a very important lesson that you learn, as a doctor, especially in the field of oncology, because this is a long-term relationship. It's a marathon. And at one point, I'm very hopeful that we will cure this disease. um, and we can talk about all of those things. But for many patients, there are going to be other goals that, are going to be more important at certain, time points in their lives, and that may not align with the best treatment options that that may be available to them. So how do you kind of balance all of that? Is an art more than science.
And it also evolves over time, right, Dr. Osmani? When you are newly diagnosed and you know that you respond to a particular type or class of drugs, and then later on in your myeloma journey, when and if you end up becoming, or your myeloma becoming refractory to some of those drugs. And also for me, young, 25 years old, going in graduate school, the quality of life expectancy I had at that time is different than now in my early 50s, where I am getting solicitation from ARP and other bodies. So the evolution in that long-term relationship, as you mentioned, I think is really important in uh, increasing patient satisfaction, but also I think improving outcome.
Yeah. So with that in mind, um, if patients want to, champion themselves or be advocates, what do you think would be the best practices, that you've observed, that you have adopted, you've seen other patients adopt?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So also when you talk medical oncology, there are specialization, right? In patient advocacy, there are also, in my opinion, specialization. You can specialize in the education area. You can specialize in research area. You can specialize advocating for policy, or you can become a general advocate, right? Similar to a general hematologist versus a myeloma doctor. Uh, my work as a patient and research advocate is to shine the light on clinical trials from the patient perspective, right? I never go to a meeting and say, this is a scientific reason for why. I want to understand that, but I want to bring the patient perspective in terms of uh, quality of life, patient reported outcome, and other ways of being able to measure not just efficacy, but also the ancillary, or if you want to call it secondary outcomes as you design clinical trials. Uh, and my goal is really, at least right now, is not necessarily to be cured, but to live as long as possible with the utmost quality of life possible. So, how do I package that into access advocacy, into research advocacy, into educational advocacy? I think is really important. And uh, you can be a reluctant advocate like I was, but as you learn more, the fact that you show up and you are among others who kind of look up to you because you have lived as long as you have with myeloma is energizing and invigorating. So start small, decide your level of comfort, but as uh, one of the things for me, I think, if I can bring it up, is there's also survivor's guilt, right? There have been dozens and dozens of patients I have known over the years that are no longer here. And patients like me say, okay, why are they not here and I am here? And it is a want, a need, a privilege to be able to pay it back. And so, really, that's how I package the advocacy work that I do.
A very comprehensive answer, Yelak, and I think you bring in the uh, the the more humanistic and emotional aspect of this as well, and why advocacy becomes important, because you also feel a part of a broader community, where all of us have specific roles, and we're working in unison towards that goal. So speaks so well about what we're trying to do here as part of this Impact Echo project, is highlighting the disparities in care given to patients from African American descent, and trying to elevate the level of care for those patients, increase literacy about the importance of clinical trials, and also get a them involved in that process. I think there's always this historic reluctance, rightly so, because of all the stigmata associated with the research. So, it's with all of those things. What would your advice be for physicians in the community, who are taking care of myeloma patients from all walks of life, from different races, ethnicities? How to best engage them as advocates for themselves, as advocates for others?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Dr. Usmani. Uh, I recently heard of a facility where once they tell a patient he or she has myeloma, they offer them the opportunity to meet with other myeloma patients who are trying to help with a newly diagnosed. That this clinic, in my opinion, has made patient advocates part of their team. Can you imagine then, as a result of that, the trust this newly diagnosed person has in her doctor, in that treatment facility, and their ability to be able to be cared for by that facility, but also the relationship that they will be able to build as a result. So, as we mentioned earlier, in my opinion, engaged patients have better treatment outcomes and are better partners in their care. So, engaging with an advocate, helping educate a patient, or mentoring an advocate pays back multiple folds. That's some of the things that I really like and admire about our myeloma doctors is your willingness to not be good in the work that you do, but also have that mindset that I need to mentor not only other doctors, but also myeloma patients.
Thank you so much, Yelak, for joining us and sharing your journey, thoughts, and wisdom. And I hope all the pearls that you've shared with us will be beneficial to our guests and listeners. And together we can improve the outcomes of all patients with myeloma, regardless of where they're coming from, regardless of their race and ethnicity. Um, Thank you for your participation, and thanks to our guests and listeners for joining in.